Hey, my name is Ben Treat. I go by Frantic Frames, and today I'm going to show you some of the stuff I've made. This is a shot that I animated using drones. It was originally inspired by Corridor Digital. They did something like this using PVC pipe. And I looked into that option. It turns out that's like really hard. So what I did instead was I just put a drone above me. This location is like one of the few that had water and like texture, but I shot a lot of them kind of all over Wyoming, Colorado, and kind of the states around me. My goal was to get unique environments that looked kind of like I was traveling across the earth. And then I also tried to keep kind of like a line across where I would have a surface almost to run. I was pretty intentional about my placement throughout the whole thing. I kept a little chart with me that was essentially a screen having all my frames, 1 through I think like 16 different poses. And essentially, you just had to imagine the movement going frame by frame and placing your hands and body in a trajectory of like a run sequence. It's not in this frame, but right here, I actually like photoshopped in a little fish, which was really fun. I thought it was an Easter egg that people were gonna notice, but it kind of got lost in the sauce, but it's in there. When I was doing this, I didn't exactly know if I was getting the right movement. There were frames that I did wrong. It's pretty easy to get your legs mixed up in an animation like this, and the thing that's easy to do is to mix up the foreground and the background. So some of these frames, I actually had the wrong leg on top in the correct pose, but that threw off the animation entirely. So I would chop my legs off and I'd switch them. And then generally it was lining everything up frame by frame in Photoshop after. I shot wide on the drone, trying to keep a good like frame in mind. And then it would be crop, rotate, zoom in, whatever it took to get a perfect lineup of my body. And generally it worked pretty well. It was probably like 9-10 hours in Photoshop, like making little tiny micro adjustments. Standing probably like right here is my dad, and he's trying to keep the drone level. When I was doing it myself, it was a really hard time to try and actually hold like a phone out from my body and then also get my arms positioned correctly. I needed my hands to be free, and that would have meant I would have had to like prop and then reach out and control the drone and then go back to being propped. And I don't think it would have been very easy. So cheers, Dad. I appreciate that. You came in really clutch. Let's go to the next one. This one's fun. I think I was like 18 or 19, I decided I wanted to try to do something that's been done by like the animators of old, and that's just mix live video footage with claymation, which is one of my favorites, and I use claymation all the time. I drove all the way to my grandpa's place out in Kansas. He had this really nice barn, and by nice I mean not nice. It was quite literally disheveled. Partway through animating, I fell through the floor, which was really lovely. It was freezing. I essentially like would run out, shoot for 10 minutes, run back into my car and shove my toes into the little grate where the heat would come out in my car, and I'd sit there and I'd breathe for like 10 more minutes, and then I'd go and do it again. And I had my socks and shoes off because I had to animate with my feet for the live action part because I needed body movement and I couldn't be holding a remote trigger in my hand. So I ripped my shoes off, I propped my toe up on there, and then I would just like I set my monitor way off, so I'd be squinting and trying to look and then moving frame by frame, getting so incredibly cold. But it gave me a really good base plate. And then I essentially went back to this setup, and I built this clay figure. Dragon Frame allows you to really do a nice like opacity and toggle between to really line up these clay elements with like your real face. And that lets you rip it apart, which is really fun. This is kind of a similar basis of like how to not fight gravity when you're working in stop motion, because one of the biggest pains when you're animating is having to have a rig that like supports like your clay, because this gives you a lot of movement and you can like work and flow through space. But every single frame, you need to like get rid of the rig and also like the shadows that the rig casts. What you do is essentially you take your camera and you point it down. And it's an old animation technique that like everybody throughout ages has used, Walt Disney. It's called multiplane. You just have your camera looking down and you have sheets of glass. You put your little clay element on this glass, and behind it you put a green screen to key. It allows you to not fight gravity, and all you have to do is keep up with all the finger smudges that end up on this glass. It's much easier than doing rig removal. But what this allows you to play with is it allows you to mix media really nicely. I learned how to do multiplane by watching other animators out there. The one that comes to mind is Lawrence Becker. He's incredible, and he uses multiplane for felt cut animation all the time. I watched the behind the scenes content on YouTube, and I drove to Home Depot and I bought just 2x4s, and I bought like these stand racks. I think I spent $100 on materials, which was a lot of money. And it like a whole day. And I just made this multiplane setup, which I still use, the same one to this day. The hard part is glass. And the trick is go to Goodwill, buy a glass table, take the glass out. Glass is expensive. Don't order that. I did that once, and it was like $600 for a sheet of glass. I will never do that again. And you set your phone on it, and you have a down shooter. You can animate anything under that. Before I started this shot, I made an animatic for it in order to plan through all the intricacies that I knew I was going to encounter. And also to make sure that my visual was going to work. An animatic is pretty much a really slow frame rate storyboard. You take the animation in your mind and you pretty much just dumb it down to key poses. And then you just run those in a video sequence so that they move. It doesn't have to be fluid. It's mostly just to block. And an animatic is only different from a storyboard because it's in a video format and kind of has a little bit more of the meat of it. People can throw sound design into animatics. There's whatever level of depth and detail you want to go into for an animatic. I think one of the things that's really important to animation is learning how to think ahead, frame by frame, physically. Because each of these steps have major roadblocks, and if you don't like prepare for those, you're going to get screwed on the back end. And that's why storyboarding and animatics end up being some of the most important tool sets for an animator, because you will sink 60 hours and then realize it's impossible, or it's impossible from how you started. And then you have to restart, which I have done plenty of times. I'll go to the next one. This is my Granavocado. I wanted the visual of the childhood playfulness of playing with your food, and then I wanted to bring life to it in stop motion. And always think about is like a avocado grenade. I use multiplane to explode particulates and keep track of it all. And it was over the course of, I think, 6 months, I lost inspiration on it. I came back to it. I added to it. I took away from it. I got a little janky with this one. I played with kind of a lot of mixed media techniques. What I did to get this moment where I throw the avocado through the air, I wanted it to slow down in like slow motion and like whiz past the camera. I essentially took an avocado and I drilled some screws into that sucker. And then I took a fidget spinner, wired this to a light stand, and then I used a camera slider to run along the movement just to track frame by frame with this avocado being thrown through the air. Scrappy is really fun because you don't need crazy tools in order to get stuff done. When I started with animation, I made the mistake of not valuing an ease in and an ease out, anticipation and deceleration. Anticipation in animation is essentially the moment before. You really need to take your time in like leading up to an animation rather than just going straight into it. So if you have a person throwing something, then the anticipation of it is going to be this arm coming back and preparing that throw. And you really need to take your time on this motion. The actual animation and movement is very quick. This is probably the bulk of the animation, and then you go this crazy, blurry, fast movement that then has a deceleration on the back end, which slows down. What this does is it gives intent and it gives an ease out of whatever you're making, and this makes an animation look real. I didn't focus on it because I thought an animator makes things move kind of 1 to 2, but I didn't think of the 1 to 2 to 3 of an actual real life movement. I think this came to me when an animator friend of mine messaged me and essentially just said, "You're taking too many frames. Tell the story in less," which at the time I was like, I was like, oh shoot, I didn't even think about that. But I was taking too much time. I was doing probably 10, 12 frames for moments that should have been 2. And it just slowed it down. It gave it this clunky feel, which can be a style, but I wanted those fast, snappy moments. You can see this in cartoons everywhere, and that's why we end up with so many what we call smear frames, which is a frame in animation where essentially you want your subject to go from one spot to another spot in the frame really fast, so you want to fill all this empty space. And what you do is you take that element and you stretch it and make it weird, and that leads you into whatever you're gonna like decelerate from with just 1 or 2 frames. There's smear frames hidden throughout my work everywhere. I think it's really fun. It breaks the physics of the world, which is the magic. At the end of this animation, I needed this puppy to pop. I cheated a little bit on the explosion at the end. I used smear frames. I used kind of a really fast moment of that explosion, and I hid those little elements of guac that would fly out and just they like splatter there. Okay, next one. Ooh. This animation is a fight sequence that I wanted to do with clothing. Push the fucking pack off of the porch or break a pound down. Get the scrap if it happened to blow it. This was one of my first animations ever. Still a pretty janky setup to this day. I think I just took my camera and I like got another light stand and I shoved it up there, and it kind of didn't work very well. I also didn't have a very wide millimeter lens in order to kind of see the whole environment. So I ended up photoshopping a lot of this outskirts in. That's why the clothes kind of stay within this boundary of this carpet, because I knew I had that space to work within. I wanted to have a wide angle lens, but I didn't own one, so Photoshop solves problems. One of the biggest challenges of this was making the clothes look like there was a body inside, which obviously I didn't always get right. Like, clothes move in their own way. So you can only give them a body to whatever extent they're willing to work with you. I essentially wanted to keep my lines sharp in order to give this structure of a body. And you had to really fight folds. Like, the folds you can watch, they're wibbly, they're wobbly, they're all over the place because you have to force them to bend to your will, and it'll drive you nuts because you will be working on one frame, trying to get the arm to look like an arm. And then you want to make sure you've got your overlaps on top of clothes so that you have this like real depth that people have when they wear clothes. Frame to frame, the times really differ. I think I've easily spent an hour or more on some frames. You have to kind of restart a lot, and this animation, I averaged probably 7 minutes per frame. There's just a lot of like elements to keep track of, all the shoes, all the arms, all the body. Animating on 2s, which is 12 frames per second, I think this was probably like a 10, 12 second animation, so like 120 frames times 7 minutes. I think this was something like 30 hours of me just on the floor. I don't do math, so this equals something. This animation I did not storyboard because I wanted to make it up as I went, sometimes that's pretty magical. You plan in your head and you run it through like you're physically doing it. At least this is what works for me. I think I have to go to my studio. I have to set up my lights. I have to get my camera on the roof. To do that, I need a C-stand. C-stand needs to connect. I need the right bolt to go into my camera to connect to that mount on the C-stand. I need a still frame so that I can Photoshop that edge without any movement, so I can just have one clean plate. And then I can mask my animation into it. This is kind of like what I do before every animation, and I'll do this for hours. That's fun. This animation here is one of my best I've ever made. The reason it's one of the best I've ever made is because I didn't make it alone. I made this animation with my cousin Morgan. Thanks, Morgan, for helping me with set design. And with my good buddy and friend, Evan Mann. It was a labor of love, and I slaved over the details along with Evan and Morgan to make this world come to life. We wanted this landscape to look like the craft store came to life. We essentially built the structure of this out of foam, and then we just went to town for 4 days straight, working full 8 to 12-hour days, just gluing, creating an 8-foot set. And we built a camera track to slide along the length of the set to really get a full perspective of all this work we did. And part of the idea was to have these leading lines that bring the viewer forward with every frame. And then we wanted a lot of side action to be happening that brought a lot of life to this environment. We had growing plants, we had little hopping frogs, and then the whole time we had flowing water, which was really fun and really challenging. Water is very fluid, it's very forgiving. It's a lot of work to keep up with because water doesn't stop almost ever. Even stagnant water kind of moves. I used multiple methods of animating water for this. This is Saran wrap. It does a really good job of simulating reflections of light off the movement of water. And you really get this flowing, pouring. This is also Saran wrap. This is hair gel. It's got a lot of natural air bubbles in it, and it's easy to boil, which is when you touch stuff a lot and it gets that stop motion-y look with all those fingerprints and little movements. It's really lovely. It's and then this last one is museum wax. Museum wax is clear water-like substance that's kind of sticky, and you can seal glasses down and you can knock them and they won't move. And you can also reuse that for flowing water. It gets really smooth, but the problem is it does slowly move on its own over time. It's kind of like a putty. So you place it, and if you don't get back to it within 5 minutes, it smooshes into all the cracks and crevices, which also means it gets into every little bit of your set. So if you leave it on a wood table and that table's got cracks in it, that stuff's dripping through. So you gotta watch for those suckers. And I guess we also used, back here at the very end, there's yarn for water. We made the ocean out of yarn just because we wanted to get one more way to animate water in there. And it might look like water. It also kind of looks like yarn. All these methods of animating water kind of led to this very flowy, very crafty world that I'm very proud of. Me, Morgan, and Evan worked really hard on this, and it's one of my favorites that I think I've ever made. I think stop motion is one of the most accessible art forms. It can really be done with an app on your phone. That's what I animated on for the first 3 years of me animating. And I moved all over the world. I animated out of plane windows. I animated out of porta potties, literally. It was not a good idea. It's about the intent, and people can make magic out of anything. I think that's what stop motion really speaks to.